Hi, my name is Phil Poirier with Bonny Doon Engineering.
And my name is Brooke Barlow, also with Bonny Doon Engineering. And today we're going to unpack and assemble a classic manual press frame.
Let's start by unpacking the two boxes.
I'll grab this box cutter, cut these open. And now I'll cut this one.
Now, it's good to have a friend. If you have a friend that can come over and give you a hand. The press weighs about 70 pounds, so as we want to unpack it, we want to not strain ourselves. We're going to pick it up and place it up on the table. Now we'll cut away all the packaging.
Without cutting the frame.
Good. Now we'll open this box up. Note on this box with the ram, there's a piece of plywood on the very top. On the flip side of the plywood is your flange. We need to save this. We'll unscrew this from here and use it right here on the press frame. In the ram box, you also have your lever bars, your gauge, a packet with instructions and parts, and the ram. So, upon unpacking all of the parts, let's set them out and identify them. We have the frame and the ram, of course. The flange. The flange assists in keeping the ram centered in the press. We have our handle, which will allow you to pump. We have a plumbing fitting, which is an elbow. That elbow will be attached to the ram and the gauge. We have a 1/4 inch T-handle hex key, which will be your general use key. A 1/4 inch L key, which you'll use one time just on the first assembly. And then a 3/16 L key, which you also will only use for that first assembly of the press. There'll also be a master tool bolt, and that will be used up here to hold any tools in the Bonny Doon press. 2 small screws that will hold the flange to the bottom of the lower platen, as shown here. The tools you'll need to provide is a box cutter, open-end wrench, 9/16 or an adjustable wrench, a Phillips screwdriver, and a large flat screwdriver. Having a few rags handy that you can get oil on would be also a benefit. First thing we're going to do is get the flange off the plywood from the packing material. You can do this with a Phillips head screwdriver, or if you have a little power screwdriver, undo the flange like so. These screws can be put aside. Next, let's install the gauge. We're going to lay the ram down on its side so we can install the gauge. Having a few rags handy really helps. I'll use one here to level the ram as I lay it on its side like so. And if you'd hand me one more rag.
Sure.
As I go to undo this plug, oil will come out. Depends on your altitude and the pressure. So I'm going to take this 1/4 inch hex key and undo this plug. Being careful, I'm going to have a rag handy. So when I get the plug out, any excess oil can be wiped off right then. Okay, so here's the plug. Set this aside for future use if you ever need to ship this back or have it repaired. Now, I'm going to reach over here and grab the elbow. This is a high pressure plumbing elbow. And I'm going to simply, by hand, find the threads here. Make sure you get it turned in, at least by hand, a couple of threads. Don't put a wrench to it until you're sure you have proper engagement of the threads. At which point we'll use a open end wrench or a adjustable wrench. Now I'm going to turn this around one more time. And I'm going to leave it oriented about straight up like so. So it's aligned with the top of the ram. Thank you. Next, I'm going to put the gauge here. So the gauge will come with the Teflon tape already installed. Again, don't put a wrench on it until you've hand tightened it. And once you are sure that you have good thread engagement, use your wrench to turn this into the ram. And sometimes I'll stand this up at this point, so I have a little bit more leverage. And now I can adjust this to stand upright. There we go. So now it will be facing the operator. So next, we'll take the flange. Note the two holes here. We're going to flip it upside down like this and put it back on top of the ram. Now we're going to insert the ram into the press frame. To do so, Brooke, if you could grab the large flat screwdriver and place the large flat screwdriver through the hole and underneath the bolt.
Okay.
Now, as you pry downward, the platen goes up. That allows me to put the press or the ram into the press frame. And I'm going to look at the holes in the flange and eyeball alignment to the two holes on the bottom of this platen. Now you can let that down. Very good. The next step is to take the two little screws along with the hex key, and we're going to thread these through the flange holes up into the platen. Just like that. And I'll do that on both sides. So next, once our ram is in place, we'll take the 1/4 inch T-handle hex key and place it right here into the receptacle. There's a hex receptacle right here. This is the pressure release valve. Next, we'll take the 2-part pump handle and assemble that like so. And that also goes here into the pump receptacle. This will be for pumping up your press. As you see, as I'm moving upwards here, our platen is moving up right now. When we want to release, we'll put our hand on the T-handle and release it back down. You only need a 1/4 turn on this, whether you're loosening it or tightening it. Only a 1/4 turn is needed. This same T-handle can be taken out and used with your tooling bolt. The tooling bolt goes right up here into the press, and it will hold all of your tooling right on here. We want to make sure we orient this and bolt it to our bench securely. So I'm going to go ahead and swing this press around the way I want it oriented on my bench. This way I have my pump handle here, my eye has a line of sight to the gauge, and I'm in the safety zone behind the column. Note that there are 2 bolt holes in the frame, here in the front and one back here in the back. I can use 3/8 inch bolts and bolt that all the way through the bench for safety. With that, thank you.
Fantastic. If you have any more questions about Bonny Doon tooling or assembly, contact us.